Well, we were talking backstage how much fun it is to get back to this kind of thing, right? Spend a little bit of time, get out and mix with everyone. And I've been really, really impressed with the level of the dialogue. And hopefully you kind of took away some interesting things from our last discussion on open standards. We think that's one of the big issues that's really kind of coming to the fore as our customer services become more essential. And so, there's a lot of dialogue on the emerging standards. There's a lot of confusion, as Bob indicated. And so, Gary, I'd like to start with you, because I know your organization looks at this a lot. What are you seeing in terms of the emerging standards, and what are the important dialogues that you think everyone should be paying attention to?
Well, thanks, Matt. At the Fiber Broadband Association, our members are a little bit different. We represent the entire ecosystem of the fiber industry. So about half our members are service providers, and the other half are the supply side of the industry. And so what's really important is that we work together collaboratively as industry to really accelerate building out fiber and being able to have digital equity. And so when I think about standards and why they're really important, it really comes down to three key things. So first is to drive down costs and speed deployment. And so an example of this is we advocated in California for a recent legislation on standardizing microtrenching. And if you've done any microtrenching, you can see that you can do it all different ways, and it can run into some disasters. So by standardizing on a technique that you can rapidly deploy across the country, then you're able to really make sure that you speed deployment and minimize impact. Other things like cost, you think about XGS-PON, that's a derivative of GPON. So by using an industry standard to really get out 10 gig PON, now you're able to really drive down the costs. And so you really can take advantage of those economies of scale. The other key thing is about protecting consumers and ensuring that you're able to have durability and market equity. And you think about, I think Matt had talked about this just a minute ago, but anything in your house, you're thinking about safety, and when you're dealing with fiber optics, it can be very dangerous. And so really being able to really protect the consumer, even when you think about your data and being able to have consumer privacy and making sure that people are taking good care of, if they're collecting data, what are they doing with that? And that really goes to the third area, it's trust. And I think that's probably the most important element of a standard, is that when you work collaboratively with peer review, that there's good intentions for what you're doing. And so, for example, is the government spending $2 billion right now to rip out Huawei equipment across the network, to protect the security of our network. And so you really don't want things that are deployed for the wrong kind of reasons, that you have to go out, because you're making a career decision when you put things in your network, and you want to make sure you put the right things in your network.
Yeah. Well, Gary, one point that you made that I thought was particularly interesting that most people don't realize. When you buy standard technology, you're essentially joining a buying group that brings power in to drive down component costs and benefits everyone, right? So that's a really great point. And Cheryl, you've got a really interesting situation with standards with your organization, because you have to deal with standards from multiple different directions. And how do you think about balancing that and supporting your organization and your members?
Yes, we do have a very interesting role at UTC, Utilities Technology Council, where our members are utilities all around the nation, and also our technology partners that help our utilities come up with technology solutions. We are unique, UTC, in the fact that we provide and we serve all types of utilities. That's IOUs, co-ops, public power, water, gas, and as you mentioned, broadband. And UTC has been very involved in broadband for decades. But standards, we have to be not only aware and continue to educate about all standards across state lines, federal. So it's very important for us to stay on top of it, as everyone has said, because with common standards, we can actually implement faster, we can save costs, we can provide safety, not just to consumers, but to the workers. who are actually doing the work to deploy this to make sure that you and I both have everything that we need. So standards are very important, and it's very important for them to coexist, to work together.
Great, thank you, thank you. So one of the things that struck me over the last 2 days is I've looked at all the innovations that have occurred, just looking at the last 2 years since we were here. And the stories are really quite moving, and I'm not so sure we're doing the best job we can promoting what our industry is doing. And Shirley, I'll ask you, because I know that you spend a lot of time thinking about this, but are we doing enough in your opinion, and what maybe could we do differently?
So I appreciate greatly your asking, Matt. And at NTCA, the World Broadband Association, we represent ILECs across the country. We have general broadband providers and do a lot of work in the advocacy arena as well as the education arena. And telling the story is so important about what this industry is doing. And I have to tell you that yesterday, sitting in both the general session as well as the executive track and listening to the stories of innovation, the stories of customer focus, the stories of deploying, and how excited your teams are by the work that they are doing. And I almost felt a little bit like I was sitting in somebody's family room, and family was kind of talking over dinner, and you were sharing these things, and the passion was coming through. But I'd really encourage this industry to be thinking about how to share that story outside of our little circle. It's really important. We all know the great stuff that you're doing, but others need to know it. And so when I think about this, I think about 4 different audiences. I think about your customers, making sure that your customers understand what you bring to the table and what you do and how you do it. I also think about your potential workforce. You heard that yesterday, and I thought that really resonated with me, that this next generation of workers are passion-driven, they're mission-driven, they want to work for something good. You all are deploying broadband to people who need it more than we ever realized how critical it was. There's no better mission, quite honestly. And I think about, because this is my realm, I think about policymakers. I think about their inability sometimes to differentiate between different sectors of the industry. And I think about the ability for you all to tell them what you are doing, how you are using resources, and why that ensures that you should have that seat at the table. And then I now think about your community leaders, because I also think that you tend to be the best kept secret, and everybody just assumes that the broadband's going to work and things are going to be fine. But the way we're watching federal funding now flow, your community leaders need to understand the value that you are bringing and why community-based providers in particular are really important. And it's one of the reasons we started our Smart Rural Community Initiative, to be able to create a platform to tell those stories. So those are all of the things that I think about. And I would just add one other note, if on that vein, tell your stories now. Reach out, be aggressive, be assertive, meet with your local representatives, meet with your state broadband leadership, meet with your governor's office. These stories that you tell with such passion and conviction are the types of things they need to hear as they're thinking through next levels of funding.
It makes complete sense. So we've talked a lot about some of the challenges we're facing, supply, certainly things like complexity, but we've also talked about some of the challenges we have around our workforce. And certainly, Cheryl, that's something I've heard you talk about. And I'd love, you have a fairly diverse membership, right? I mean, they're all high-tech industries, yes, but they're quite different. How is the challenges around developing, the workforce of the future impacting your members?
Well, that is definitely at the top, a top priority. And just to amplify what Shirley said, because I'm very passionate about changing that narrative for the industry as well, because like you, I hear these stories all the time of how everyone is risking their lives day and night to bring these services to you and me. So I just want to tell you, like I've been telling all of my members and everyone that will listen, I challenge all of us to tell your story, tell your impact to anybody, your friends, your family, anyone, because that leads also into workforce development. We're looking for skilled laborers to join you side by side, because we do have a situation, not just in this sector, but all throughout the other sectors of the United States, of a declining workforce. But the energy sector and utility sector is having the most challenge, and this is critical. like I said, broadband, deploying it, access, affordability. It's critical that we have these skilled workforce who are passionate and know exactly what the purpose is and what you're doing. So with telling your story, it helps us to also collaborate with education institutions to make sure that we're starting out as early as possible, that they know about this industry and the potential that there is for the future and the longevity of it and all that you do. So I just want to say we're definitely addressing this in many ways, mainly through collaboration, because you have to work with, I gave the example, education. Changing the curriculum sometimes so that you're not just learning on the job, that you are getting some theoretical training before you actually hit the job, because there's a lot of things involved as far as safety and so forth and technical knowledge. So we're working together with our members and other regulators, lawmakers, and other industries to make sure that we are equipped with the workforce of the future to join you. But yes. That's what we're doing.
Absolutely, yeah. So thank you. And I've heard, Gary, you've talked about this generational opportunity that we have. Are we capitalizing enough on that in terms of the way we think about what we're doing as an industry, but also in how we communicate what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, so, we're in a unique period of time, a period of history. I call it like an FDR moment. And it's really exciting. It kind of reminds me back of my first startup back in the late 90s, and just felt like, the whole world was changing. And right now, we have the single largest investment in fiber in history. We normally are, we'd going about $4 billion a year in federal subsidies. That's going to jump to about 4x that this year, and to about 5 to 6 times that here in the next few years. And so with all this money coming in the industry, it really provides an opportunity to make sure we have that critical infrastructure that really can put us all in position for the future and for generations to come. But with that, we can only grow our workforce about 15 to 20% a year. And so with all this CapEx coming in, so not only federal and local, state subsidies, but we have a lot of private equity coming in. So how are we going to get those boots on the ground to make sure that fiber gets in and gets in right? And so we launched a fiber optic technician program this year. And if you anybody come to the Fiber Connect conference in Nashville? Hopefully you guys did. That was a great time. But you might have seen us doing a signing ceremony with the Department of Labor. So our fiber optic technician, there's lots of courses out there, but there was none that were narrow and really deep. And so this course has 144 hours of classroom and lab training, and then 2,000 hours of apprenticeship. So these are rock star fiber optic technicians. We're working with the state broadband offices across every state of the nation and territories. And so we're going to be launching this across every state. What's great about this, if you're a veteran, you don't have to go to some crazy place to get a job. This is a career that you can do everywhere, because everywhere needs fiber optics. And so we're really excited about this, and it really provides a great opportunity to get more fiber out there quicker.
Wow, that's an incredible investment. Really, really impressive. And I encourage everyone here. I was at Fiber Connect. Great engagement. By the way, that was my first time with a group of people, and it seemed like a decade. So very informative. And one of the things what I really liked about it is the way that you were engaging the government, to kind of bring them into this. And that kind of brings me to my next question, which is, most of us here don't have a hotline to Capitol Hill, but there's obviously a lot going on that impacts our industry. And so I'll start. Shirley, you've got a really good political view in terms of the lay of the land. What do you see happening? We hear the news, but what's going on with all of this legislative back and forth, and where do you see things going?
So you talk about a moment in time. We are literally today in a moment in time, as we've got congressional leaders meeting over at the White House right now with trying to figure out a way to carve a path forward. And without getting into the schoolhouse rock of how legislation is actually made before you've had your second cup of coffee, let me just share that right now the infrastructure legislation did go through the Senate. Very bipartisan, very popular. The question is how you tie the reconciliation piece to it, and that is the negotiation that is ongoing. honestly, I remain incredibly optimistic. The Democrats have self-imposed an October 31st, happy Halloween deadline. And I actually think that we will see something, because the longer things sit out there in Washington, the more they start to smell a little bit. So I do think that there's going to be great motivation to move things forward on both fronts, the social front and the infrastructure front. And I think it has been, to your point earlier, Matt, it is just so profound that we finally have policymakers saying, yes, broadband is infrastructure. It's the superhighway of the next generation. So I do think we're going to see that money, but I also would say the money is going to come down very differently than what this industry is used to. We're used to the federal government pushing the money down. It is now going to push down primarily to the states. That's a whole new ballgame for a lot of folks when you're thinking about capital investment.
Yep.
So that goes back to my point of you've got to figure out ways to work with those folks, because they are going to be suddenly getting resources that I'm not entirely sure they know what they're going to do.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting analogy. We always say that, to our team, go engage with your customers on their strategy and help develop their strategy, so when they go make a decision, you're naturally a default. And I think what you're saying is the same thing there, in terms of if you're not talking to the decision makers at a local level who may not know what to do and may appreciate your advice, everyone in this audience should be thinking about that.
Can I also add, the other problem with Washington and in the States is the shiny toy syndrome. So while you all have been doing the work, you have proven you've been doing the work, there's still folks that get, very excited about the new entrants and, low Earth orbiting satellites, and 5G is going to take care of rural America. Those are things we need to make sure we tell the real story on.
By the way, some of you have even shared the video from last year of Carl hitting the satellite with the baseball bat with your boards. Apparently they find it interesting and entertaining, but you may want to share that with some of the people who are looking at the shiny objects, because they don't understand the physics and they don't understand the hard work everyone here is doing. And so I'll actually ask both of our panelists. Cheryl, you want to share your thoughts on this?
Well, the same thing that Shirley has said. I mean, at UTC, we work with the federal, we work with the FCC, we work with the state as well. We're only a certain amount of people. So what we do is that collaboration. Our members, we help them come together like, oh, okay, this is a solution, let's talk. And then we've come up with a broadband deployment middle mile. So our IOUs will work with our co-ops or public power to take it to the point, based on regulation, of where they can, to actually deploy broadband in these underserved and underrepresented areas. But we're working around the, I guess, white tape, red tape, or whatever that the regulations put forth, in front of us. But we work with the state commissioners as well. We talk with them. We're having a broadband workshop coming up in November in Spokane. Hopefully, y'all can join us. And we have one of our commissioners with us that's going to be talking about some of the challenges. And we also help the commissioners at the state level understand and break down some of the technical language, and to help them to understand when they're making these decisions how it affects their communities. So what Shirley is saying is absolutely right, but we all can do that. Just speak to people and try to break down some of the dense material into very simple information and how it affects every individual. Because what happens also at the state level with the regulators, we actually get to see the whole community. We get access to the whole community, and now we can figure out, okay, this is how we can deploy broadband at a higher education institution. These are the underserved areas, and this is who we can work with. So we get a more granular view of what's going on and how to strategically make recommendations for our members to move forward and execute.
Great. Gary?
Yeah, I mean, so while the infrastructure bill, and I agree with Shirley, right now it's intact, and it's really just sitting on the sidelines with reconciliation planning. So we do believe that whether it passes on October 27th or Halloween or sometime this fall, it will pass. But there's no need to wait, because once it passes, then it gets enacted into law, then NTIA has 6 months for the notice of funds availability. There's a lot that has to happen. Meanwhile, the FCC has the National Broadband Plan, or the National Data Act, and they have to be able to put in those broadband maps. And so there's a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes. And Shirley's team and we are working really close to put a whole playbook together on how you guys can take advantage of this and be able to be in position for this $65 billion that's going to the states. But what you can do today is ARPA. So about 12% of the ARPA money has been allocated for broadband. And so that's $30 billion at the state level and another about $12 billion at the local level. So that money is available now. So about half was distributed this year, another half will be next year. In addition to that, how many RDOF, they're trickling out, a few awards at a time, but RDOF's going on, and you have Reconnect, and then private equity. So there are so much money out there right now, and it's going to be coming for years. So make sure that you're at the front of the line and take advantage of that. But we're really confident, those of you that have been members helping us work on the House side to make sure that this infrastructure bill is bipartisan is really critical. And I think we've been really successful in doing that because we don't want to flip-flop between administrations. This is really the future of generations to come, and we want to do this right the first time. The other thing I just want to mention is $10 billion for the coronavirus capital project plan, $10 billion. That's available. We were really successful in getting the Treasury rules to prioritize fiber, so we're excited about that. And so there's plenty of money right now to take advantage of.
Fantastic. So we're a little over time, but what I wanted to point out, though, is that clearly, Shirley, Gary, Cheryl, your organizations are a tremendous fount of knowledge. And what I wanted to close is to say, you're doing amazing things. I know we've talked about in the arena of cybersecurity, right, which is our next big topic. Before we go, anything in particular that any of you'd like to share about what you guys are doing to help your members and your organizations cope with what may be the biggest long-term challenge facing our industry?
So I will say if there's one issue that keeps me up at night, it's cybersecurity, and it's thinking about my members' networks and the networks that they manage and how we keep those protected. So one of the things we've done, I have the privilege of sitting on the FCC's CISRIC board, which is way beyond me, but we were able to set up the small broadband provider ISAC, which is the information sharing platform that our participants are able to share risks in real time. What are they seeing? What's happening? What are the threats to the network? And we've really leveraged that platform to the point where this fall, one of the things that we were doing with some of our partners, including FBA and others, is under our CyberShare umbrella, we're actually going to do a breach exercise. We're going to do a ransomware exercise. And I don't know if any of you saw yesterday that ransomwares are already exceeding mid-year this year the entire total of threats last year, and those are only people who are willing to admit that they had to pay something. So we're holding these breach exercises. They're going to be terrific opportunities to get your team to roll up their sleeves. They are free. I think it's going to be a really important opportunity for the entire broadband industry to get together and actually kind of work collaboratively through that.
Great. All right. So, well, thank you very much. Fascinating. Thank you for your partnership. Thanks for sharing your thoughts today. Hopefully everyone has got some ideas to take back on things that we can do to promote our industry, develop our workforce, address cybersecurity concerns. So thank you very much. Have a great day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.